Hi, and welcome to the last part of Chapter 9 Psychoanalytic Approaches to Personality. Here we're going to start with psychosexual stages of personality development. Then we're going to look at the techniques that are used by psychoanalysis for their therapy, and then end off with why is psychoanalysis important? Why is it still important? And of course, evaluation of Freud's contributions. So beginning with the psychosexual stages of development. So he created a 5-stage development of how personality develops over time, right? So starting from birth to 12 months, and then 1 to 3 years, and so on until you hit adulthood here. And in each of these 5 stages, there's going to be each of these first 3 stages, generally there's going to be conflict to get to the next stage. These later stages are not so much about conflict. So conflicts around, at the first 3 stages, conflicts around about ways of obtaining sexual gratification. It's all about sexual gratification or pleasure in some way. And if they do not successfully overcome the conflict, then they get stuck there, and that's called being fixated. And if you get fixated at a certain stage, that comes with certain personality traits that develop because of that fixation. So how you deal with conflict gives rise to various aspects of your personality and individual differences. Trying to change the slide. There we go. Okay, so the first stage is the oral stage. Main source of pleasure and tension reduction are around the mouth, lips, tongue. Everything is about the mouth. You see kids putting things in their mouths all the time, just constantly. So the key conflict that they have at this age is weaning, withdrawing from the breast or the bottle. It talks about how there's 2 different parts to this. Okay, so there's a biological component and a psychological component of weaning, right? So the biological component, so the mouth, constantly putting things in their mouth, they want immediate satisfaction and they get pleasure right away by putting things in their mouth. So if you're going to wean, you're not going to have that anymore. The psychological component, that is, you can have excessive pleasure by continuously putting things in your mouth, or that also encourages dependency, right? So that's the psychological component. So what that looks like in adulthood is if you get fixated at this oral stage, of course, is the, say, behaviors that have to do with the mouth, like smoking or nail biting or overeating or drinking, anything to do with the mouth. And that's the biological part, right? The psychological part that would come if you got stuck at this stage would be somebody who's overly dependent, wants other people to make decisions for them. So the next stage, the anal stage, that's 18 months to 3 years. So this stage is all about the butt, right? Obtains pleasure from anal sphincter. So first, they're holding on to it and they're holding on and they don't want to go. Okay. And if you talk to people with kids, they will tell you, like, it's, getting them to pee on the toilet's one thing, but getting them to poop is another, right? So they're controlling, they don't want to expel. And then later it's retaining. Yeah, first is pooping everywhere, and then later they want to maintain some sort of control here, and so now they're not going to go. That's what this one says. Many conflicts arise around the child's ability to achieve self-control. So adults who are fixated at this stage, they're not able to successfully overcome this conflict. They become, if they have little control, they become sloppy. Or they can have too much control. And that gets more into compulsive controllers, compulsive disorders. Trying to control everything. Okay. The next stage, the phallic stage. This is 3 to 5 years old. This is when the child discovers that they have a penis or they don't have a penis. They discover their genitals, awakening of sexual desire towards outwards. They discover that they can gain pleasure by touching them. Also sexual desire directed towards the parent of the opposite sex. So this is where Freud comes in with his Oedipus complex and his penis envy. So the Oedipus conflict, unconscious, that's where the boy loves the mom, wants to have sex with the mom, and sees dad as the competitor. So he wants to kill dad or get rid of him in some way. This leads to castration anxiety, okay, because the boy realizes that the dad is the major competition. Penises have a lot to do with this. So he becomes very anxious that the dad might control the situation by cutting off his penis. After the process of identification comes to be, this is because the boy realizes that he's not going to get to love his mom and have sex with his mom and take the dad's place. It's not going to happen. So instead, he identifies with the dad. The process of wanting to become like dad. That is the sign of a successful conflict resolution. Freud said this is the beginning of the superego, morality, and the male gender role. Now, for girls, it's different. Girls at this stage discover that they do not have a penis. And they blame mother for this. It's the mother's fault that she does not have a penis. She wants a penis. The girl desires the father. So in both of these cases, they desire the opposite sex parent, right? So the girl desires the father. This is never fully resolved, right? Because the boy has a penis that can be cut off by the dad. So there's a forced resolution here. The girl doesn't have anything that can be cut off, and then Freud never really worked any further on this. So instead, he just said, most of this Electra complex, where the girl desires the father, that wasn't even Freud. That was Jung. Freud talked about penis envy. Jung got into the fixation at the phallic stage, that you're vain, impulsive, narcissistic. It's about the girl desiring the father, never really resolved. Freud's point of this was he rejected this concept, but he did believe that women were morally inferior. Okay? Because they didn't have this same situation develop like the boys do, where they were forced to develop their superego and morality. Latency stage. This is age 6 to puberty. So we're sort of at the end of the sexual conflict. The latency stage is, Freud said, little psychological development occurs at this stage. The focus is on child learning skills and abilities necessary to succeed as an adult. So there's no sexual conflicts at this time. It's a time of rest. So there's really nothing happening. They're just learning skills to be an adult. Other psychologists, of course, as you would know, argue that much psychological development happens at this time. We have like identity development, and you learn social relationships, and you learn decision making. You learn about hard work. You learn about, there's so many things that you learn during puberty and adolescence, right? But Freud didn't go there. He just said this was sort of a break, which we know is not true. And then finally, genital stage, puberty throughout life. So latency ends with a sexual awakening brought about by puberty. The libido is forced on the genitals, but not in a manner of self-manipulation. Now you are in a healthy relationship, having healthy libido sex with another person. It's not about just yourself. This stage is not accompanied by a specific conflict either. People reach this stage only if conflicts are resolved at previous stages. Okay, you can't get to this genital stage and have a happy, healthy, satisfying relationship unless you've successfully got through the other ones. Why do I do this? There we go. Personality development is largely complete by the age of 6. Okay, that's important to remember. By the age of 6, you've gone through all those conflicts, and your personality is kind of set at that time, according to Freud. Personality is dependent on how or if the conflicts were resolved. The next section, personality and psychoanalysis. So this is about how do you treat people, right? What is psychotherapy? Psychoanalysis is also a method. It's a theory. It's also a method of deliberately restructuring personality, helping people with mental health disorders and also people with other problems with living. So the goal of psychoanalysis is to make the unconscious conscious. Right? So the first aim of psychoanalysis, if you go into therapy, the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to be trying to identify unconscious thoughts and feelings that you have repressed, and these unconscious thoughts and feelings and desires and urges they're leaking out and causing problems in your life. So once you become aware of these things, the second able is to enable the person to deal with it realistically and maturely. So once you figure out what it is, then you're going to deal with it. So the first thing they have to do is figure out what nasty impulses and ideas and beliefs are living in your unconscious and making your life difficult. Techniques. Goal is to make I said that, mental illness, conflict, restrained urges, slip out of the conscious. We said that. There. First identify, become aware, deal with maturely. Challenge. Here's the big challenge. How do you penetrate the unconscious mind of the patient? So they walk into your office, you're assuming, you believe, they have all of this stuff that is repressed. You have to access that. And how are you going to do it? They use 3 methods. Free association, dream analysis, and projective techniques. So let's take a look at those. Psychoanalysis offers interpretations. Can you hold on one second? Try to keep this so... Where did that slide go? I can't delete this. Okay, I guess I didn't make another slide. Free association is when they come into your office, they sit on the couch, and they say whatever comes to their mind. It's uncensored, and the idea is that in doing so, words are going to slip out, ideas are going to slip out, and it is the therapist's job to notice things that are coming out and interpret these things. Okay. It does involve a little bit of training for the client, right? You're not going to just sit down and start spewing out words. It's a little bit unnatural, right? So it takes a little bit of practice. It may take a little while for the person to become relaxed enough and then just say things that come out of their mind without any sort of self-judgment. That's the other part. They can't be holding things back because they think something might be inappropriate. They can't censor what they're saying. So it does take time, it takes training, it takes a lot of trust to be able to sit there and just say what comes to your mind. It does go on for a very, very long time. It could go on for years. Dream analysis, second one. So Freud believed that dreams was your unconscious way of, your unconscious way of playing out these instincts and drives in your sleep, right? So your unconscious is playing around with these wishes and desires, and what they do sometimes is your mind is going to disguise some of these things. So because you don't want to, some things are going to be too upsetting So instead of thinking of the real thing that you've repressed, your mind might disguise it as a black horse running down and, I don't know, stabbing a water buffalo who represents something else, right? So everything is going to be representing other things. That's where they talk about manifest content. So what the dream is, it actually contains. And then there's latent content, which is what the elements of the dream represent. Yeah, so they're all symbols for what's going on in your unconscious, and it's the psychotherapist's job to listen and notice these things and interpret these things. Finally, projective techniques. You've all seen this Rorschach drawing, right? So apparently the point of this is that a person is going to project what is in their unconscious onto this ink blot, right? So if you're a very angry type of person, or you've got a lot of angry emotions and hostile, aggressive, you might see this like as an angry beast who's coming to kill you. Or if you are a happy person and positive and yada, 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 you may see this as a celebration of life or whatever it is. But everybody's going to see this differently depending on what is rattling around in their unconscious. And again, it's the psychoanalyst's job to interpret what the patient is saying, the client is saying, what's coming out of their unconscious. The other one they do, okay, so the Rorschach is the ink blots. And then finally, the other one that you can do is create a drawing or art. So it's very, very similar, but the idea, you've seen art therapy, right? The idea is that when people make drawings, they're going to include in those drawings aspects of their unconscious, and then the psychotherapist can interpret the drawings because they're revealing things about that client. So the process of psychoanalysis, they offer the psychoanalyst, okay, the therapist themselves offer interpretations of psychodynamic causes of the problem. Through many interpretations, the patient gains insight and understanding of the unconscious source or dynamic of the problem. So the psychoanalyst is going to listen to your free talk, or they're going to interpret your dreams, and they're going to make suggestions to the client of what these may represent. And then the client is going to be listening and maybe gaining insight as to why they are feeling as they are feeling or behaving as they are behaving, because the psychoanalyst is suggesting ideas of why that might be. The process is very difficult and wrought with roadblocks and challenges, as you can imagine. So one is patient resistance. Your mind put a lot of effort into repressing all of these feelings and urges and desires and pushing them down real hard and keeping them down there. So there's going to be a lot of resistance from the patient because those thoughts and feelings and motivations don't want to come out. So, but it's also a sign for the therapist that if the patient starts to resist, you know you're getting close to something. There's patient transference. That is where the patient transfers their feelings or something from their unconscious to the analyst. It can be positive, it can be negative, but the patient starts to have portray their relationship, bond with the therapist in the same way that they bond with some other authority figure in their life. So the therapist is watching how the patient acts towards them. Repetition, compulsion, personal problems reenacted in therapy. Yeah. Signs that the therapy is getting close to an issue. So in both of these cases, these are actually good signs that they're getting somewhere. If these things are not happening, you're not tapping something, right? These things only happen if you're tapping the angry beast within, as they say, and the beast doesn't want to come out. So the client starts engaging in these activities. So it's a good thing. Ooh, we're getting to the end. So why is psychoanalysis important? So a lot of people, I mean, it's kind of a joke that, Freud is thought of sometimes as old school, or kind of like they're Freud jokes that people make because of all the emphasis on sex and that sort of thing. Partially true, but Freud came out with a lot of major concepts. Like his concepts and laid the foundation for so many things that people are still using today. And I mean, that's true of anything, right? When an idea first comes out, it may seem ridiculous, but it's the beginning of the path of the development of what's going to happen in the future, right? So psychoanalysis now is widely used, but the reason it's widely used and the reason it exists is because of Freud. So continuing influence on modern psychotherapy, right? They still use free association. They still talk about transference. Research topics, including the unconscious, defense mechanism, psychic energy, they're still using that, and they're still doing research, and they're still finding empirical support for these things. Freud's ideas have been incorporated into everyday language and the logic of understanding one's own behavior. We use this in everyday language, right? To understand our own behavior. People will say they don't date because they are conflicted over sexuality, or this person can't do this because they have commitment issues. Or this person acts this way because they've got control issues. We talk like that all the time, and that is all grounded in Freud. Laid the foundation for topics and questions that psychologists are still interested in today. For example, he came out with a developmental sequence of growth of personality, right? With the conflict, the sexual stages, that was his. Don't really use it in the same way, but it was the first version, right, that people have further developed, but it was the first. Methods to resolve internal conflicts, we still use those. The whole idea of the unconscious was huge and still is today. And he outlined an approach for understanding human nature, which was one of the first as well. So psychoanalysis has had a major impact on psychology, psychiatry, and Western thought in general. And when I spoke to, because I also teach in the School of Social Work, and in speaking with the social workers, we had a conversation about this, and they talked very much about how influential psychoanalysis is in the counseling that they deliver, and how it is still widely used by them and in their work and in their practice. Criticisms. Always going to be some criticisms. Some say Freud's theory is primarily of historical value and does not directly inform current personality research. One extreme, of course, and other people say psychoanalysis is alive and well. To be honest, I have never spoken to anybody who has said this, other than the jokes that people make. Most people that I speak to believe that it is alive and well, just maybe in a different form. Freud did not believe in the value of experimentation or hypothesis testing in establishing validity of psychoanalysis. So it's not really tested. Well, his version of it back then was not. So psychoanalysis started out as a belief, right? It was not verified. It was not a fact. I mean, they're starting to find, they have found empirical supports for much of it now, but at the beginning it was not. He relied on case studies of a select group of wealthy women to generate the theory of human nature. So the group of wealthy women who formed the basis for psychoanalysis, very wealthy, likely white women who came from rich families who didn't work, probably they were highly educated, highly verbal, and they had all the time in the world to lay on his couch and give him a lot of money and talk for years. So it's a very narrow sample to base a universal theory, right? And then finally, some psychologists, some personality psychologists take issue with Freud's negative view of human nature and emphasis on sexual drives in childhood development. So you could argue many things in that point. Sexual drives in childhood development, that was... Anyways, we know how controversial that is, especially, I mean, at the time, and even now, people don't want to talk about that. Anyways, those are the main criticisms. But as we know, I think overall, psychoanalysis and Freud's contributions it's been huge and had a major impact, and many respect Freud for those things, even though they have these criticisms. And that is it. That is the end of chapter 9. There is a video at the end here that I've included for you to, sort of a summary video of the main ideas and sort of brings everything together, but I won't play it here. It is there for you to watch as you will. And that is the end of chapter 9. See you in the next video.